The parte uno de dos. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus made $84,000 a year. Good salary, stable job. He drove a decent car, lived in a nice apartment, had a gym membership he used twice a month, and subscribed to every streaming platform known to humanity. On paper, Marcus was doing fine. But at 31 years old, Marcus had exactly $412 in savings. Not $400,000, not $40,000, $412. And here is the part that should stop you cold. Marcus was not irresponsible. Marcus was not stupid. Marcus was not blowing money on gambling or wild nights out. Marcus was just following the pattern. The same pattern that most people around him were following. The same pattern that looked completely normal from the outside. The same pattern that is quietly, methodically, and invisibly destroying the financial future of an entire generation. Today we are going to talk about that pattern. We are going to name it. We are going to dissect it. And then we are going to talk about the people who saw it, rejected it, and built something completely different. Stay with me, because what comes in the next few minutes is not what most financial videos tell you. And if you make it to the middle of this video, you are going to understand something about money that most people never figure out in their entire lives. This is not a list of tips. This is not a budget spreadsheet dressed up as advice. This is about understanding why the pattern exists, how it traps intelligent people, and what the ones who escape it actually did differently. Save this video. You are going to want to come back to it. Okay, let us start at the beginning. There is a word in behavioral economics called anchoring. It means that the first piece of information you receive about something becomes the reference point for every decision you make after that. And most of us received our first financial anchoring before we were 10 years old. You watched your parents. You watched your neighbors. You watched the adults around you go to work Monday through Friday, buy things on weekends, stress about bills on the first of the month, and repeat that cycle until someone handed them a gold watch and told them they were free. Freedom at 65. That was the anchor. And because that anchor got set so early, so deep, and so universally, most people never question it. They just build their entire financial life around a timeline that someone else decided for them before they were old enough to have an opinion. That anchor is the first part of the pattern. The second part is what I call the comfort gradient. Here is how it works. You get your first paycheck. You feel great. You buy something that makes that feeling last a little longer. Then the feeling fades. So you need a slightly bigger purchase next time to get the same feeling back. And gradually, almost invisibly, your spending rises to meet your income. Every time your income goes up, your spending follows. Not because you made a conscious decision to spend more, but because your brain is constantly recalibrating what feels normal. This is not a character flaw. This is neuroscience. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. But what it means financially is devastating. It means that most people who earn more money do not build more wealth. They just live more expensively. And they arrive at 45 or 50 with a lifestyle that requires every dollar they earn just to maintain it. They have built a financial structure that can only survive if everything stays exactly the same. No disruption, no illness, no job loss, no economic shift. And we all know how often life agrees to those terms. So you have the anchor, the timeline someone else set. And you have the comfort gradient, the invisible spending escalator. Those two forces together create a trap that is extremely hard to see from inside it. Because from inside it, everything looks fine. From inside it, you look like everyone else. And looking like everyone else feels like safety. But it is not safety. It is synchronized vulnerability. Now here is where it gets interesting. The people who escape this pattern do not escape it by being smarter. They do not escape it by earning dramatically more money, at least not at first. They escape it by doing something that sounds almost too simple to be the answer. They change their reference point. Instead of looking at the people around them to define what is normal, They look at the outcome they actually want, and they work backwards from there. Let me give you a specific example of what that looks like in practice. Most people, when they get a raise, ask themselves, "What can I afford now that I could not afford before?" That is the comfort gradient in action. The reference point is their current lifestyle. The people who build real financial independence ask a completely different question. They ask, "How much faster does this get me to the number I need?" Same raise, completely different question, completely different outcome. This is not about deprivation. This is not about living in misery so you can be rich someday. This is about having a destination that is real enough and clear enough that it actually competes with the pull of immediate spending. Because here is the truth about willpower and financial discipline. Willpower is not the deciding factor. Clarity is. People do not fail to save money because they lack discipline. They fail to save money because the future version of themselves that benefits from that saving is too abstract, too distant, and too hypothetical to compete with the very concrete pleasure of spending right now. When you make the future version specific and real, that changes. So the first practical shift is this. Stop thinking about saving as the absence of spending. Start thinking about saving as paying for a specific future. What is that future? Not a vague idea of financial security, a specific life. Where do you live? How do you spend your mornings? What does financial pressure feel like when it is gone from your body? Get uncomfortable with how specific you make it, because that specificity is what gives your future self enough weight to compete with your present self. Now let us talk about the part that nobody in finance likes to admit. The math of personal finance is actually simple. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference consistently over time. That is essentially the whole equation. If it is that simple, why are 78% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck? Why is the median retirement savings for someone in their 50s under $100,000? Why do people who earn six figures still feel financially precarious? The math is not the problem. The problem is everything underneath the math. This is the part of the conversation that most financial content skips, because it is uncomfortable. Because it requires you to look at your behavior, not just your spreadsheet. Here is what is actually underneath the math. Number 1, identity. Your financial behavior is a direct expression of how you see yourself, not who you want to be, who you currently believe you are. If deep down you believe that people like you do not have generational wealth, that investing is for people with a different background, that financial freedom is for people who got lucky or started with advantages you did not have, then no amount of budgeting advice is going to help you. Because every time you get close to making a real change, your identity will pull you back to familiar territory. This is not motivational fluff. This is documented behavioral psychology. Identity-based behavior change is one of the most robust findings in the research on habit formation. People act in ways that are consistent with who they believe they are. Always. So the question is not just, what do I need to do differently? The question is, who do I need to become to do those things sustainably? Number 2, social environment. You are not just influenced by the people you spend time with. You are financially calibrated by them. If everyone in your social circle spends a certain amount on dining out, on vacations, on cars, on clothing, that becomes your baseline for normal. And deviating from that baseline carries a real social cost. You feel different. You feel like you are missing out. Sometimes you feel judged. This is why the people who make the most dramatic financial progress often go through a period of intentional isolation or recalibration of their social environment. Not because they hate their friends, but because they recognize that their environment was setting a financial standard that was incompatible with where they wanted to go. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths in personal finance. Your social life has a price tag, and sometimes that price tag is your financial future. Number 3, the relationship between spending and emotion. Most unplanned spending is not about wanting things. It is about managing feelings, boredom, stress, anxiety, loneliness, frustration at work, the desire to feel rewarded after a hard week, the desire to feel in control when other areas of life feel chaotic. Spending is one of the fastest and most socially acceptable ways to regulate these emotions. And because it works in the short term, the brain reinforces it. Until you understand what emotions your spending is actually managing, you will keep trying to fix the behavior without addressing the cause. And that never works long term. Okay, we are about halfway through, and I want to stop here for a moment. What I just described, the anchor, the comfort gradient, the identity trap, the social calibration, the emotional spending loop. This is the real reason most people do not build wealth. Not lack of information, not lack of income, not lack of opportunity. The most important financial decision you will ever make is not which fund to invest in. It is whether you are willing to honestly examine the beliefs and behaviors that are currently running your financial life on autopilot. Most people never do that examination, which is why most people stay in the pattern. Now here is what nobody tells you about the people who actually break it. They do not have a perfect system on day one. They do not wake up one morning with total clarity and execute flawlessly from that point forward. What they have is a specific moment where the cost of staying the same becomes more painful than the discomfort of changing. For some people, that moment is a number on a bank statement. For others, it is a conversation with someone who is living the life they want and realizing that person is not fundamentally different from them. For others, it is a health scare, or a job loss, or a relationship ending that strips away the comfortable illusions and forces a real look at where the current path actually leads. You do not have to wait for a crisis to have that moment. You can manufacture it right now by doing one brutally honest calculation. Take your current income. Take your current savings rate. Project it forward at a realistic investment return. And calculate the actual date, not a vague someday, the actual calendar date, when you would have enough to be financially independent at your current lifestyle cost. For most people who do this exercise, the number is shocking. Not because it is impossible, but because it is so much later than they assumed. And that shock is useful. That shock is the beginning of a real decision. Now let us talk about what the reframe actually looks like, because this is where we get practical. The conventional financial narrative tells you to start with a budget, track your spending, cut the small things, build from there. That approach is not wrong, but it starts with the wrong end of the problem. Starting with a budget is like trying to fix a leaking boat by bailing water faster. You might be able to keep up with the leak for a while, but you are spending enormous energy on something that could be solved much more efficiently by patching the hole. The holes are not your coffee or your subscriptions. The holes are housing, transportation, and the structure of your income. Housing is the single largest financial decision most people make, and it is almost always made based on what they can afford at maximum, rather than what serves their financial goals at minimum. Moving to a slightly less impressive apartment, taking on a roommate, or making a strategic housing decision that reduces your largest monthly expense by even $200 or $300 a month compounds into something extraordinary over 10 years. Transportation is where status and practicality go to war, and status usually wins. The average new car payment in the United States right now is over $700 a month. $700 a month that could be going into an investment account. A used vehicle that reliably gets you from point A to point B costs a fraction of that. The transportation gap between what people pay and what they need to pay is one of the largest single sources of financial destruction in the middle class. Income structure is the one that gets ignored almost completely in mainstream financial advice. Most financial advice is written for people with a single salary, optimizing around the edges of that salary. But the mathematical ceiling on a single salary is hard. There is only so much you can cut. The upside of building additional income streams has no ceiling. A single scalable side project, something that does not trade hours for dollars, but instead builds an asset that generates value while you sleep, changes the entire financial equation. Not right away. In the beginning, it generates almost nothing. That is the part that stops most people. Because we have been trained our entire lives to expect compensation that is proportional to effort in the short term. Building a scalable income source violates that expectation completely. You put in significant effort for months or years before the financial return becomes meaningful. But when it does become meaningful, the compounding effect is extraordinary. And here is something important about that process. The skill you build while trying to create a scalable income stream is often more valuable than the income itself. The person who spends a year trying to build a YouTube channel and fails to grow it still ends up with a deep working knowledge of video production, scripting, audience psychology, content strategy, and digital marketing. Those skills are worth money in the job market. They are worth money as a consultant. They are worth money in ways that have nothing to do with the original project. Effort in the direction of building something almost never produces zero return. It almost always produces either the intended return or a different return that you did not expect. Both of those outcomes are better than not trying. Now let us talk about investing, because this is where the most expensive mistakes happen. The biggest investing mistake is not picking the wrong stock. It is not bad timing. It is not even fees, although fees matter. The biggest investing mistake is delay. Let me give you a number that is almost impossible to believe until you see the math. If you invest $300 a month, starting at 25 years old, at a 10% average annual return, you will have roughly $1.6 million at 65. If you wait until 35 to start that exact same investment, same amount, same return, you will have about $600,000 at 65. Same person, same discipline, same amount invested. The only difference is 10 years. The cost of that 10-year delay is more than $1 million. That is the real price of waiting until you feel ready. That is the real price of, I will start investing once I have more figured out. More than $1 million. Compound interest does not care about your intentions. It only rewards action. Now, the conventional advice is to invest in low-cost index funds, automate the contribution, and leave it alone. That advice is sound. Broad market index funds with minimal expense ratios, automated contributions regardless of market conditions, a long time horizon. These are the core of a sensible investment strategy for most people. The math on this is well documented, and the logic is straightforward. Most actively managed funds underperform the index over long periods after fees. But here is what most investment conversations miss. The psychological component of investing is at least as important as the mechanical component. When the market drops 30%, and it will drop at some point, most retail investors do not sit calmly in their rational analysis and hold their position. Most retail investors feel fear, and fear makes them sell. And selling at the bottom of a decline is how you convert a temporary paper loss into a permanent real loss. The people who build wealth through investing are not the ones who found the best fund. They are the ones who developed the emotional infrastructure to stay invested when every instinct screamed at them to get out. That emotional infrastructure is built through education, through understanding market history, through having enough liquidity elsewhere that a market drop does not threaten your immediate survival, and through developing a genuine long-term orientation where short-term volatility becomes noise rather than signal. This is not something you can shortcut. It takes time and deliberate effort to build. But the return on that effort, in terms of actual investment outcomes, is enormous. Let us also talk about debt, because debt is one of the most misunderstood financial tools in existence. Most financial content treats debt as inherently bad. Cut it up, pay it off, be free of it. And for consumer debt, high-interest credit card debt, auto loans, payday loans, personal loans taken for discretionary spending, that advice is correct. That debt is expensive, it produces no asset, and it functions as a slow drain on your financial life that gets worse the longer it exists. But there is another category of debt that the pay-it-all-off narrative completely ignores. Debt used to acquire assets that generate returns higher than the cost of the debt. If you can borrow money at 4% and deploy it into something that historically returns 8 or 10%, the math of that is obviously positive. That debt is not a liability, it is a lever. Real estate has been used this way for generations. When you buy a rental property with a mortgage, you are using the bank's money to acquire an asset that generates rental income, appreciates in value over time, and can be financed again to acquire the next one. Done carefully and with genuine understanding of the risks, this is a legitimate wealth-building mechanism. The key phrase is, done carefully and with genuine understanding of the risks. Leverage amplifies outcomes in both directions. It accelerates gains when the asset performs well. It accelerates losses when it does not. Anyone who uses debt as a financial tool needs to have a clear-eyed understanding of the downside scenario, not just the optimistic projection. But refusing to engage with leverage at all because of a blanket, debt is bad belief, means leaving one of the most powerful financial tools completely unused. Now, we are getting close to the end of this, and I want to come back to Marcus. Remember Marcus? $84,000 a year, $412 in savings. Here is what happened when Marcus finally did that honest calculation. When he projected his current path forward and saw the actual date he was heading toward, he did not overhaul everything overnight. He did not go from 0 to extreme savings rate in a week. What he did was make 3 specific decisions. First, he changed his housing situation. He moved to a smaller place and rented out a room. That single decision freed up $600 a month. Second, he sold his car, which had a $400 monthly payment, and bought an older vehicle outright. That freed up another $400 a month. Third, he started automating a transfer to an investment account on the day he got paid, before he had the chance to spend the money. Not a huge amount at first, $300 a month. Those 3 decisions, without any other changes, without extreme sacrifice, without going back to school or getting a second job, added $1,300 a month to his financial future. That is $15,600 a year. Over 30 years at 10%, that is approximately $2.8 million. Marcus did not become a different person. He did not discover a secret investment strategy. He just stopped letting the pattern run his finances on autopilot. He interrupted 3 specific behaviors that were quietly extracting his future from his present. And here is the part of Marcus's story that does not usually make it into financial content. The first few months were genuinely uncomfortable. Not because of the money, but because of the identity shift. Because his friends thought he was being weird. Because he felt out of step with the people around him. Because his brain kept generating reasons why the old way was actually fine, and this new thing was unnecessary. That discomfort is real, and it matters. Anyone who tells you that financial change is purely a mechanical process of making better decisions is leaving out the most important part. The social friction, the identity disruption, the psychological resistance. Those are the actual obstacles, not the math. The math is the easy part. So if you are in a moment right now where you know what you need to do, but you are not doing it, the question worth asking is not what is the right financial move. You probably already know that. The question worth asking is what part of my identity needs to shift to make that move feel like something a person like me would do. Because until that shift happens, information alone will not move you. There is no shortage of financial information in the world. The gap is never information. The gap is always the distance between knowing and being. Most people who watch this kind of content, and I mean this in the most direct way possible, will not change anything. Not because the content is not useful, but because change is uncomfortable and familiar is comfortable, and our nervous system is extremely good at finding reasons to stay comfortable. The people who make it to this point in the video and actually use something from it, those people have something specific. They have a reason that is bigger than the discomfort of changing, a vision of their future that is vivid enough to compete with the pull of the present. That is not something I can give you. That is something only you can build. But I can tell you that the investment of time in building it, in getting genuinely specific about what you want your financial life to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what it feels like when the pressure is gone, what it feels like to make a decision without the constant background noise of financial stress, that investment is the highest return thing you can do. More valuable than picking the right fund, more valuable than finding the perfect budget app, more valuable than any individual financial tip. Because with a clear enough destination, the tactics follow naturally. Without a clear destination, even the best tactics get abandoned when they become inconvenient. And they always become inconvenient eventually. Let me leave you with the framework that ties all of this together. Step 1. Identify your anchor. What timeline are you unconsciously building toward? Who set that timeline? Is it actually yours, or did you inherit it without questioning it? Step 2. Calculate the real number, not a vague goal, the specific monthly income or lump sum that covers your actual life at the standard you want. Then, calculate the specific date your current path gets you there. Step 3. Identify the pattern. Which of the 3 holes is draining your financial future most aggressively? Housing, transportation, or income structure? Start there, not with the subscriptions. Step 4. Build the identity first. Before you change the behavior, get clear on who you are becoming. The behavior follows identity more reliably than willpower. Step 5. Automate the non-negotiables. Investment contribution, savings transfer, debt payment. The things that cannot be skipped should not depend on your mood or discipline in the moment. They should happen automatically before you have access to the money. Step 6. Develop the emotional infrastructure for investing. Understand market history. Build liquidity. Develop the long-term orientation that makes volatility tolerable. Step 7. Revisit the pattern annually. Your life changes, your income changes, your obligations change. The financial structure that served you at 28 needs to be reassessed at 35. This is not complicated, but it is not easy either. Because easy and complicated are not the same thing. The most important financial moves are almost always simple in concept and difficult in execution. Not because the math is hard, because the human part is hard. And the human part is always the real game. One last thing before I go. The financial content you consume, the videos you watch, the books you read, the podcasts you listen to, all of it is worthless if it stays in your head as information. The only thing that changes your financial life is action. Imperfect, uncomfortable, uncertain action. So here is what I want you to do right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Open a notes app or grab a piece of paper and write down one thing. One specific behavior or belief in your financial life that you already know is costing you. Not a vague, I should save more. A specific thing. A specific pattern. The car payment you know is too high. The identity story that says, investing is not for people with your background. The social environment that sets a spending standard you cannot sustain and build wealth at the same time. Parte dos de dos. Write it down. Name it. Because you cannot change something that does not have a name. And then ask yourself what it would cost you to let that pattern run for another 10 years. That number, whatever it is the actual price of staying comfortable. Now you decide if that price is worth it. I am glad you made it this far. Most people do not. And I mean that genuinely. The fact that you are still here means something. Tell me in the comments, what is the one financial pattern you named just now? The one thing you already know is costing you, but you have not fully confronted yet. I read these, and I want to know. This content is educational and does not constitute professional financial advice. Consult a certified financial advisor before making investment decisions.